All right, let's get into it. Have you ever gotten a blood test report back, seen that section called liver function tests, or LFTs, and just had your eyes glaze over? Yeah, you are definitely not alone. So today, we're going to break it all down, decode what these numbers actually mean, and figure out the story they're telling us about one of the most hardworking organs in your entire body. You know that feeling of being tired all the time, no matter how much you sleep? Or maybe seeing a yellowish tint in your skin or eyes, what doctors call jaundice? These aren't just random things happening. They can actually be signals, your body's way of saying, hey, pay attention to the liver. And these tests, they're how we listen in. So, here's our game plan. First, we'll talk about what this whole report card for your liver really is. Then we'll put on our detective hats and look for the key markers that tell us if there's any damage. After that, we'll check on how well the liver is actually performing its jobs. And finally, we'll put all those clues together to see what it all means. Sound good? Let's go. All right, section 1, the liver's report card. I love this analogy because it really is the perfect way to think about what these tests are doing. See, a liver function test isn't just one single test. Nope, it's a whole panel of them. It's just like a report card from school. You don't get one single grade, right? You get scores in different subjects. Well, that's exactly what LFTs do. They give your doctor a bunch of different scores on enzymes and proteins to create a really clear snapshot of how your liver is doing right now. Okay, so let's look at the first subject on this report card, the markers of damage. Imagine your liver is this huge, busy factory with millions of tiny workers, the liver cells. Now, if the factory walls get damaged, what happens? Workers spill out, right? It's the exact same idea here. When liver cells get hurt, they leak certain enzymes into your blood, and by measuring those enzymes, we can tell if there's been an injury. The first and honestly the most important worker we look for is called ALT. Now, the reason ALT is so important is that it pretty much only lives inside liver cells. So if we see a lot of it floating around in your bloodstream, it's like a super specific signal flare telling us, hey, the problem is almost definitely in the liver. So what's a normal level? Well, for ALT, we're looking for a number somewhere between 7 and 56. You can think of this as the green zone. If your number starts climbing above that, it's a red flag that some liver cells might be inflamed or damaged, and it tells your doctor they need to dig a little deeper. Next up is AST. It's another one of those enzymes that spills out when cells are damaged. But here's the catch. Unlike ALT, AST isn't a total liver specialist. You can also find AST in your heart and in your muscles, and that little detail is super important. The healthy range for AST is usually a little lower, somewhere between 10 and 40, so if this number is high, it's another clue for your doctor. It could be the liver, but because AST hangs out in other places, it might also be pointing to an issue with your heart or muscles. And this right here is the key takeaway. It's all about context. If your ALT is high, the investigation points straight to the liver. But if only your AST is high, it requires a bit more detective work. Doctors will actually look at the ratio of the two to get even more clues about what might be going on. Now let's talk about our third marker, ALP. This enzyme hangs out in the liver's plumbing system, the bile ducts, and also in your bones. So if ALP levels are up, it might mean there's a problem like a blockage in those ducts, almost like a gallstone is causing a traffic jam. The normal range for ALP is a bit wider, usually sitting between 30 and 120. When this number starts to rise, it's like a pressure gauge going off, telling doctors to take a closer look at the whole bile duct system. Okay, so we've looked at the signs of damage. That's one part of the story. But now we need to ask a different question. It's not just about whether the factory is damaged, it's about whether it's actually doing its job. This is where we measure performance. First up, bilirubin. You can basically think of this stuff as your body's trash. It's a yellowy waste product that's left over when old red blood cells break down. And one of the liver's main jobs is to be the body's waste management center. It has to collect the bilirubin, process it, and get it ready to be thrown out. And this little journey here shows you exactly why the liver is so critical. See that third step? If the liver isn't working right, it can't process the bilirubin. The trash just starts to pile up in your bloodstream. A healthy liver is super efficient, so it keeps bilirubin levels really low, usually between 0.1 and 1.2. But when that waste management system goes offline, the yellow trash builds up, and that is what causes the classic visible sign of liver problems:
Jaundice, that yellowing of the skin and eyes.
Another huge job for the liver? It's a manufacturing plant. Specifically, it builds the crucial proteins that your body needs for your blood to clot properly. We call them clotting factors. The PT test measures how long it takes your blood to clot, which tells us how well that manufacturing line is running. The result is usually given as something called the INR. A healthy INR is right around 1. But if your INR is high, maybe 1.5 or even 2, it means your blood is taking way too long to clot. And that is a major red flag that the liver's manufacturing plant isn't keeping up with production.
So we have all these numbers, markers for damage, measures for performance, but what does it all mean when you put it together? In this last section, we're going to connect the dots and see how doctors use these patterns to figure out what's really going on.
One of the most common reasons for slightly elevated liver enzymes these days is something called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or NAFLD. It's basically when too much fat builds up in the liver, often linked to diet, obesity, or diabetes. It puts a lot of stress on the organ. And of course, much bigger jumps in these numbers can point to more serious conditions, things like hepatitis, which is inflammation of the liver, or cirrhosis, which is severe scarring, can cause those LFTs to spike dramatically, signaling some major damage. And honestly, the list of potential culprits is pretty long. As you can see here, everything from alcohol abuse to certain medications, even something as common as Tylenol if you take too much, to gallbladder problems can throw these numbers out of whack. But this right here is probably the most important thing to remember. Your LFT results are not a diagnosis. They are clues. They're the starting point of a conversation that you and your doctor are going to have. They're what guide the investigation. By understanding what these tests are actually looking for, the difference between damage and performance, you're no longer just a passive observer. You're an informed partner in your own health. So the next time you see that report, you'll be ready. The only question left is, what will you ask first?